I was hit by a car and injured my head. The doctor warned of possible amnesia. Jokingly, I asked my boyfriend who he was. After a pause, he said, just friends. I was in a car accident, and the doctor warned of possible amnesia. Jokingly, I asked my boyfriend who he was. After a pause, he said, just friends. I got hit by a car and injured my head. The doctor said I might develop amnesia. Jokingly, I asked my boyfriend, who was sitting beside my hospital bed, who he was. He paused for a moment, then said we were just friends. I stared at Joseph sitting by my bedside as he coldly uttered the words just friends. His expression was distant, not like someone making a joke. The words gotcha, didn't I, stuck in my throat, and all I could do was quietly look at him. If the doctor hadn't called him, he probably wouldn't have even come to the hospital. But I didn't question it. I paused and forced a nonchalant smile. Really? Well, that's a lot of trouble for you then. He gave a cool response, as if I had wasted his time. Without looking up from his phone, he said, since you're awake, I'll be off. I've got work to do. Before I could react, he was already standing up to leave. As he reached the door, perhaps out of some leftover sense of decency, he turned back and said, get some rest. The smile on my face only disappeared once he left and closed the door. My expression turned blank. No one knew Joseph and I were dating. We had a college romance. After graduation, we moved to Shanghai together and landed jobs at the city's top company as marketing planners. We were young, but we knew office relationships weren't ideal, so we kept it quiet. For years later, we both became managers, each leading a department that competed with the other. There was even more reason to keep our relationship a secret, so we continued dating in the shadows. Once, I hesitated and asked if we should make it public. After all, there wasn't an official rule against dating at work. But each time, he brushed me off without much thought. I wasn't even sure if we were still a couple at this point. But today, I got my answer. The doctor told Joseph the first might experience temporary memory loss, but assured him I'd recover soon. Even so, he had the nerve to tell me we were just friends. Maybe he wasn't afraid I'd remember and confront him later. He didn't care if I had lost my memory or if I was joking with him. He probably wanted to break up for a long time now. And of course, without breaking up, how else could he openly pursue Hannah? A woman's intuition is sharper than any radar. The truth is, things had already cooled between Joseph and me. We had been together for too long, from sophomore year to now, a total of 7 years. We knew each other as well as we knew the lines on our palms. So any little change in him, I couldn't miss. The first sign was when a new intern joined his department, a pretty girl named Hannah. Her last name is Clark. An HR friend once gossiped with me about her, under father on her employment form. She filled in Clark, our company's boss. A rich, pretty girl working in her own family's company. That's how Joseph explained why he was paying her extra attention. We can't afford to offend her. Plus, she's just a naive girl. She's not my type at all. You're overthinking. I didn't bother pointing out that this naive girl was 2 years older than me. I kept quiet and accepted his excuse. Later, I don't know if he stopped caring about me or just didn't bother hiding things anymore. 2 weeks after Hannah started, I logged into Joseph's long-unused music account. I found out he and Hannah had followed each other. He hadn't listened to music in years, too busy with work. This account had been something we used during college, when we'd listened 2 hours of music together. Back then, he even made me a playlist named after me, filled with love songs that reminded him of me, songs by my favorite artists, songs I shared on my social media, songs he listened to when he missed me during long-distance breaks. I checked, and he had deleted that playlist. The most recent tracks were trendy Korean pop songs that Hannah liked, music he wouldn't normally care for. Since we worked in marketing, I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was trying to keep up with young trends. So, I quietly logged out of his account. I'm not the type to confront someone without solid evidence. After all, the one who stays composed at the table is always the one who lasts till the end. Of course, Joseph and Hannah's coincidences didn't stop there. At the beginning of February, Joseph took on a project with his team. I was away with my team handling another project, and all I heard was that his client was a difficult British man. After a long day, I hadn't even eaten yet, so I called him to check in on his project. He didn't pick up, likely busy, so I sent him a message. He never replied. Later, I saw him post a group photo on social media, with Hannah smiling brightly beside him, making a peace sign. The project must have gone well. His caption read, "Know yourself, know your enemy." Hannah posted a similar photo with the caption, "Win every battle." I clicked into her profile and found that their social media bios had matching quotes, a sign of some hidden bond they shared on this project. His old bio had been catching the Ruby from the sea. Because my name is Ruby, I wondered if he thought of me when he changed it. Probably not. He hadn't returned my calls or messages, yet he commented on Hannah's post, "Don't forget to eat. Take care of your stomach." I touched my own hungry, aching stomach and shut off my phone. That was the second time I silently endured his behavior. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. The doctor gave me the all clear. I hadn't heard a word from Joseph, though he did send a bouquet of my favorite cappuccino roses. Holding that bouquet, I decided to give Joseph one more chance. I called him from the hospital corridor. It took a while for him to pick up, and when he did, I calmly asked, "Joseph, I'm getting discharged today. Do you have time to come pick me up?" We both silently agreed not to mention the whole amnesia and just friends thing, as if it had never happened. He didn't say anything for a while, then finally spoke. "Sorry, Ruby? I'm too busy. I can't get away. How about I call a car for you?" "What are you busy with?" I asked, still calm. He paused, probably surprised. I was always understanding, never one to press for answers. But I knew our first project had just wrapped up and this was our slowest time. Yet he claimed to be busy. He didn't respond, and I sighed before hanging up. When a man loves you or doesn't love you, it's always obvious. I remember when we had just started working, and one night I suddenly collapsed from a stomach infection at 3 a.m. I called him before I passed out. When I woke up, there he was, sitting by my bed, eyes red. He had one foot in a slipper, the other in a sneaker, both left shoes. I couldn't help but weakly laugh, but his face was full of fear, his eyes instantly turning red again. "You're still laughing. When I found you lying there, my heart almost stopped. Next time, call 911 first." What if I hadn't picked up? I smiled at him, full of trust and reliance. "But to me, you're the safest person, see? Once upon a time, he really did care about me. Once upon a time, we had something beautiful, something genuine. Even though everything is almost unrecognizable now, I can't help but smile with a touch of irony when I think of those distant memories." I shook my head and tossed the bouquet of cappuccino roses into the trash beside me. "Don't like the flowers?" a voice asked from behind. I turned around to see a stranger, a man I didn't recognize, pointing to the flowers in the trash and apologizing. "Sorry. I'm the driver who accidentally hit you yesterday. I brought you to the hospital and contacted your emergency contact, but I had to leave for something urgent. This is a gift for your discharge. Also, I've settled all your hospital bills. I'm really sorry. If you need anything else, please let me know." I couldn't help but laugh. So even these flowers were from someone else. I looked up and politely apologized. "I'm sorry. I thought they were from someone else." Inside, I sighed. I've always prided myself on being reasonable and composed. But being well-mannered doesn't mean I'll let people walk all over me. Joseph and I were truly over. When I got back home from the hospital, Joseph was already there. I opened the door and stepped inside. He was sitting on the couch, the TV on, showing a variety show he didn't care about. His attention fixed on his phone, probably texting someone, with a faint smile on his face. The soft glow from his phone screen made his expression look oddly gentle. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen that kind of gentle smile on his face. I stood by the door, unnoticed. He was so absorbed that he didn't even hear me come in. It wasn't until I softly called his name, "Joseph." He immediately wiped the smile from his face and looked up at me. My gaze fell to the phone in his hand. He instinctively locked the screen and flipped it face down on the couch, staring at me in surprise. "You're back from the hospital?" I couldn't help but finally laugh at him, at myself. I looked at him warmly, but there was a cool detachment in my voice. "We need to talk. Our breakup was what you call amicable. We're both calm people, and the whole process didn't take long. We're adults. It's all very civil, with nothing much left to discuss." We both knew where things stood. After I said, "Let's break up," he didn't ask why, just stayed silent. I think in that moment, he probably felt relieved. After a while, he simply said, "I'm sorry." I didn't accept his apology. I stayed calm, organizing the details of our split. My tone was steady, and I didn't seem sad at all, which caught Joseph off guard. After I asked him to move out as soon as possible, he suddenly interrupted me. "Ruby, you don't seem sad at all." He frowned slightly, his gaze studying my face with curiosity, as if he couldn't understand. Men are funny creatures. Even when they no longer love you, even when the breakup is exactly what they want, they're still not satisfied seeing you so composed and indifferent. In his mind, I probably should have been in tears, begging him to stay, so he could feel a sense of pride amidst his irritation. I looked up at him, emotionless. I didn't tell him I had already been sad. I was sad when he ignored my texts but commented on Hannah's social media post. I was sad when he deleted the playlist he made for me, replacing it with trendy Korean songs he listened to with Hannah. I was sad when he told my pretend amnesiac self that we were just friends. I was sad when he was off in places I couldn't see. sharing flirtations with Hannah in their little adult game of cat and mouse. I had already been through all the sadness. To me, Joseph was like a benign tumor that had grown inside me. It wasn't life-threatening, but if left alone, it would eventually turn malignant and slowly drain my health and vitality. I wasn't afraid. You just have to cut it out before it spreads. It would hurt, but only for a while. In the end, I'd be healthy again. Just before Joseph finished packing and left, I calmly asked him one last question. Joseph, did you fall for Hannah because she's Clark's daughter? Or just because she's her? He paused at the doorway, looking back at me. Tall and handsome, his face had matured from the boyish charm I once knew, now carrying the quiet confidence of a man used to weighing pros and cons. I used to think he was still the shy young guy who blushed when he awkwardly confessed to me on the college track. But now I realized somewhere along the way, he had become someone who navigated the deep waters of ambition and self-interest. After a long pause, he finally said, Ruby, people always want to move up. I couldn't help but laugh at that. At least I respected his honesty. I smiled at him, genuinely, and said, Joseph, I wish you all the success in the world. May you fly high and achieve all your dreams. His gaze lingered on my face, and for a moment, I thought I saw a trace of regret in his eyes. But whatever that regret was, it was nothing compared to his ambition. In the end, he sighed and said, Ruby, don't hate me. I didn't respond. The downside of an office romance is that even after breaking up, there's no clean escape. Work still has to go on. When my taxi pulled up in front of the office, I saw Joseph and Hannah. They weren't alone. There were others from their team too. It was lunchtime, and they were probably heading out for a meal. Hannah was full of energy. Her face lit up with a playful smile as she chatted animatedly with Joseph, who stood beside her, smiling softly, his gaze protective. Whenever she got too close to bumping into someone, he gently guided her by the arm. It was so familiar, yet so distant. He looked happy after our breakup. I stayed in the taxi, watching until they disappeared into a nearby cafe. The driver, glancing at me curiously, asked, crushing on that tall, handsome guy? I laughed and replied, that's my ex. The driver's expression immediately turned awkward, as if he wanted to comfort me but didn't know what to say. I saved him the trouble, adding, don't worry. It doesn't bother me anymore. When I walked into the office, Bella was delighted to see me. She hurried over, smiling. Ruby, you're out of the hospital? You didn't even let us come visit. I smiled and kept walking. It was no big deal. And here I am, perfectly fine. How's the recap on that Hong Kong project? She followed me to my office with some printed reports in hand, then looked around to make sure no one was around before whispering, Ruby, don't look at the data just yet. I've got something to tell you. I put down the papers and looked at her. She seemed upset for some reason, her expression a mix of frustration and hesitance. Ruby, you know Albert is moving to head the Nanjing branch next month, right? We've all been saying that the director position will come down to you or Joseph. You two have had equal performance over the years, and honestly, I wouldn't mind either of you getting the role based on merit. But, her voice trailed off, her face filled with reluctance to continue. I smiled softly. It's okay, it's just us. You can say it. She hesitated a bit longer, then leaned in and whispered, but a few days ago, I saw Joseph and that Hannah from his department hugging in the break room. Everyone knew Hannah was rumored to be the boss's daughter, so Bella was clearly angry, thinking Joseph had an unfair advantage. I curled the edge of the report in my hand, fighting the urge to laugh. So while I was in the hospital, wondering why Joseph hadn't responded, he was off cuddling with someone else. But honestly, it wasn't surprising. I gave Bella a reassuring smile. It's fine. The decision will be made by upper management. We just have to do our jobs and see how it plays out. Bella sighed and I went back to reviewing the reports. When Joseph knocked on my office door, I was genuinely surprised. In my mind, even though Joseph and I broke up smoothly without any drama, that just means I'm a decent person. It doesn't mean Joseph and I can casually chat and pretend like we're just normal coworkers. If we don't need to, I thought we'd both avoid any personal interaction from now on. That was until I understood why he came to see me. He stood tall in front of my desk, his gaze cool and composed as he looked at me. After a brief pause, he finally said, Ruby, I thought you would have resigned by now. His tone was a mix of advice and warning. Ruby, we were together for 7 years. So don't say I'm heartless. Albert's leaving for Nanjing next month, and one of us is going to take his position as director. If I were you, I'd start thinking about my next move and plan an exit strategy. I looked at him, fully understanding his message. He was convinced he'd get the promotion and was subtly urging me to quit. Before he made things difficult for me once he became director. With the boss's daughter now his girlfriend, he likely forced me to leave to avoid gossip. This was his kind way of advising me to leave before things got ugly. I could accept a man's change of heart, that's life. But I never expected him to lose even the last shred of decency. I looked at him like I was seeing a stranger and said my first curse word to him, "Joseph, you're a real piece of trash." He stood there silently and took it. My first face-to-face encounter with Hannah came a week after that conversation with Joseph. Despite using office relationships or messy as an excuse to hide our relationship, Joseph and Hannah were now very publicly together. I saw their lovey-dovey posts on social media. There were countless co-workers congratulating them, while only the mutual friends Joseph and I had from college messaged me in shock, asking what had happened. I didn't reply to any of them. The day Hannah approached me was just an ordinary afternoon. Most people were either out for lunch or resting at their desks. I was alone in the break room, grinding coffee beans, the rich aroma slowly filling the air. That's when Hannah appeared behind me. I stepped aside to give her space, but she didn't move. Instead, she stood there, looking me over with a curious, almost provocative stare before abruptly saying, "I know you and Joseph used to date." She had a baby face and was shorter than me. I looked down at her, calm and slightly raising an eyebrow in confusion. She tilted her head up to meet my gaze, scanning my face for a reaction. When she didn't get what she wanted, her eyes flickered with disappointment. After a pause, she continued, "I saw the playlist he made with your name on it. And catching the ruby from the sea? You guys weren't that great at keeping your secret." I stayed silent, patiently waiting for her to finish. She went on, My dad really likes Joseph. You know, Joseph is young, talented, mature, driven. My dad says Joseph reminds him of his younger self. My dad wants to mentor him. Joseph has an unlimited future ahead of him, and it just so happens that I like him a lot too. And he likes me. We're together now. But Ruby, your presence is a bit of an eyesore. I hope you'll have the decency to resign on your own. That's when I realized why she had come, first to show off, then to pressure me into leaving. Holding my coffee cup, I remained composed, my tone calm, even with a hint of a smile. I looked down at her and said, "Miss Hannah, all personnel changes at this company have to go through formal procedures. If you came here today to talk about firing me, I suggest you let HR handle it and inform me of the reason." Her face turned pale, clearly not expecting me to be so unfazed. As I turned to leave, I added, "Oh, by the way, any personnel changes for managers and above require the chairman's direct approval. So, in this company, the only person who can fire me is the chairman himself. Miss Hannah, you're just an intern in Joseph's department. You're overstepping a bit." Without waiting for her reaction, I walked out with my coffee cup. Not long after my conversation with Hannah, Albert's transfer to Nanjing was officially announced. Before he left, the chairman threw him a farewell banquet. All the department heads and senior management attended. It was common knowledge that along with Albert's departure, some key personnel changes at headquarters were bound to follow. When the HR manager placed my invitation on my desk, Bella looked anxious. Bella was someone I personally mentored. She slumped over her desk, first cheering me on with a "Good luck, Ruby," then seriously adding, "Ruby, no matter what happens, we're all behind you. If things don't work out here, we'll follow you somewhere else." I laughed, tapping the invitation on her forehead playfully. "What are you talking about? It's just a dinner. Have you forgotten my life motto? Build a bridge when you come to the water. Carve a path when you face a mountain. What's there to worry about? Besides, I wasn't going to be the one to lose." On the day of the banquet, I felt surprisingly calm. In the private room, department heads from marketing, management, HR, finance, and operations were gathered around the table. Chairman Clark sat at the head, with Hannah on his left and Joseph next to her. When everyone saw Hannah, they exchanged subtle glances. What had once been a rumor was now confirmed. This intern was sitting next to the chairman. But since Clark hadn't formally introduced her, everyone pretended not to notice, keeping quiet. I sat next to Linda from finance, eating and drinking in moderation, making small talk when necessary, and remaining silent when appropriate. No one talked business that night. The focus was on Albert's contributions to the company and wishing him success at the Nanjing branch. It wasn't until the third round of drinks, when the small talk had mostly wrapped up, that Clark set down his chopsticks and brought up the real purpose of the gathering. He was in his early 50s but looked sharp and energetic like a man in his 40s, with a commanding presence as he scanned the room. After wiping his mouth with a napkin, he spoke, aside from sending Albert off. "There's something else I want to talk about." I put down my chopsticks and looked over at him, catching a glimpse of Joseph out of the corner of my eye. He was smiling faintly, poised and confident, sitting next to Hannah. They looked like a perfect match. I looked away, lowering my eyes as I picked up a towel to slowly wipe my hands. Clark's voice was calm and steady, "As you all know, I have only one daughter. When she graduated, I arranged for her to join the company. But she's always been headstrong. She didn't want anyone to know her identity and wanted to work her way up from the bottom. Over the years, she's done quite well, and I've heard many of you compliment her in front of me. I'm proud of her. Now that the timing is right, and with Albert heading to Nanjing, I think it's time to formally introduce her to all of you. His gaze quietly fell on me amidst the crowd, carrying a smile and a hint of pride. He extended his hand towards me and said warmly, "Ruby, come over to your father. It's time for everyone to meet you." I calmly set down my napkin and smiled. In the dead silence of the room, the only sound was Joseph's water glass being knocked over. I glanced in his direction. His face was still composed as he smiled and apologized, wiping out the spill with the napkin, moving with an unhurried grace that saved him from appearing flustered. Then, he looked up at me, his face slightly pale. But I couldn't read the emotions hidden deep in his eyes. I looked away without sparing him another glance. I stood up and, amidst the stunned expressions around the room, walked toward the head of the table. As I reached the main seat, I placed a hand on the back of Hannah's chair, her face now drained of color. In a polite and soft voice, I said, "Miss Hannah, could you kindly move aside?" I heard someone sharply inhale. After the dinner served its purpose, it quickly ended. I could only imagine the storm this night's events would stir up at the company. But what intrigued me more was Joseph. He had once told me, "Ruby, people always want to move up." I wondered now if he felt like he was still on that path to success. I didn't glance his way, not even sparing him a look. As the dinner concluded, Joseph and a devastated-looking Hannah approached my father to say goodbye. I overheard Joseph's restrained, low voice as he greeted us, "Mr. Clark, Miss Ruby. We'll take our leave now." I remained silent as my father's piercing gaze fell on Joseph's face, then on Hannah standing beside him. After a moment, he smiled warmly and said, all right. Once everyone had left the room, the smile slowly faded from my father's face. He turned to me and asked, "What's going on with you and Joseph?" Yes, I have mentioned Joseph to him once, right after I graduated, but I never told him we were dating. Still, with his experience, he must have guessed. I smiled under Clark's scrutinizing gaze and answered coldly, "You saw it yourself, didn't you? Hannah stole him from me. Her mother was good at stealing other people's relationships, like mother, like daughter." I paused, then added with deliberate emphasis, "Dad. The last time I called Clark Dad was when I was 7 years old. Back then, he had just divorced my mom, and I was standing at the gates of our villa, clutching his sleeve, repeatedly asking, Dad, why did Mom leave you? Say something." But he didn't. I didn't understand then. But as I grew older, I learned the complexities of adult relationships. My dad and Hannah's mom were childhood sweethearts. Hannah's mom married someone else because she thought my dad was too poor, and my dad later married my mom, who helped him build his business from scratch. Years later, Hannah's mom divorced and reappeared in my dad's life with Hannah. Clark, still bitter over being rejected for being poor, didn't forget his childhood love, even though he mocked her for her past choices. My mom, ever the dignified and graceful woman, never spoke ill of him in front of me. She divorced him swiftly, and without fuss, taking only what was rightfully hers. After their divorce, Clark didn't marry Hannah's mom. Instead, he kept her around, taunting her for her lack of foresight. Hannah's last name wasn't originally Clark, it was Smith. When she was 8, she changed her surname to Clark to please my dad. They both thought they could flaunt their happiness, but they had no idea I was aware of everything. I found out when I was 8. I snuck back to the villa one day and saw my dad celebrating Hannah's birthday, holding 10-year-old Hannah in his arms with her mother smiling next to him. They looked like one big happy family. After that, I never called him Dad again. We barely saw each other. Joseph only knew that my parents were divorced and that I took my mother's last name, Ruby. After I graduated, Clark asked me to join his company. He said, "I only have one child, Ruby, and that's you. You and your mom built this empire with me. Who else would I give it to? That woman's always tried to get her daughter into the company, but I've kept her out. Ruby, I know where my priorities lie. My mom is a proud woman, and when she divorced Clark, she took nothing but what was fair. I'm not like her. I won't hand over what's rightfully mine to anyone. The more it displeases others, the more satisfaction I get." So, I joined the company after graduation, starting from the bottom of the core business department and working my way up. Clark knew about Joseph and kept an eye on him, praising his talent and potential. All because I had once mentioned Joseph to him. I planned to explain everything to Joseph once Clark publicly acknowledged me. But Joseph surprised me by making his move first. Looking at my father, I saw for the first time a hint of weariness in his eyes. He sighed and said, "It's my fault, Ruby." I chuckled. "It's just a man's nature. I couldn't help but remember what Hannah had said to me in the break room, that my father saw himself in Joseph. In some ways, they were quite similar, both ruthless and opportunistic when it came to cutting ties. Oh, and neither had much taste in partners. When I returned to the office 3 days later, the gossip had already made its rounds. Everyone was back to their usual calm demeanor, treating me the same as before. If anything, their smiles were just a little more enthusiastic. These were seasoned professionals who knew exactly how to strike the right balance. It was a relief, and I carried myself as usual. Only Bella was upset with me. She scolded me for making her worry, only to find out I had been playing dumb. I smoothed things over with a seafood dinner. As she cracked open a lobster claw, she asked me, "So you're really the boss's daughter? What does that make, Hannah?" Then, I didn't hide anything from her, giving her a quick summary of the situation. She looked at me in shock. Wow, there are actually people this shameless in the world, parading around pretending to be the boss's daughter. That's disgusting, Ruby. While you were gone, everyone was gossiping. Can I tell them the truth? I can't stand Hannah's arrogance. If she really was the boss's daughter, fine. But to find out she's just a wannabe? What's she even showing off for? I smiled and handed her a piece of lobster meat. It's no secret. If people ask, feel free to tell them. I didn't underestimate Bella's ability to stir things up. By the end of that afternoon, everyone in the company knew the truth about Hannah. When I went to the finance department to get a project budget approved, I saw Hannah standing at Linda's desk. Linda frowned, pointing at the reimbursement form. "Why are you trying to expense a bag through the company? This won't get approved. Also, I suggest you review the rest of your reimbursement items carefully. Personal purchases shouldn't be filed under company expenses." Hannah's face turned awkward at Linda's words. She grabbed the form and before leaving, shot me a sharp glare, as if I had orchestrated the whole thing. I didn't say anything. Ever since my father publicly acknowledged me, I started getting involved in every aspect of the company's operations, to better understand its overall development. Of course, Joseph didn't get promoted to director either. Albert was still remotely managing things from Nanjing for the time being. After I moved up, my managerial position became vacant. Bella still needed more experience, so we brought in a business manager from another big company to take over my role. Once the personnel changes were finalized, many of my colleagues sent me congratulatory messages, either via WeChat or text. Only two people didn't reach out, Joseph and Hannah. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or something else, but ever since I returned to the company, they'd both been avoiding me. There was no need for it, really. I was too busy getting a handle on the company's endless tasks to pay them any mind. Besides, we were on different paths. What did it matter? But clearly, they didn't think the same way. Hannah came to find me first. Same empty break room, same coffee beans, but her expression had shifted from arrogant to angry. She stood behind me and said bitterly, "You're such a hypocrite." I ignored her. She went on, "Your mom acted like she didn't care about anything and just left. She even said she'd never have anything to do with the Clark family again. I really thought you guys didn't care about any of Clark's assets. But here you are pretending to be all virtuous only to come crawling back. If you and your mom were really so noble and didn't care about the money, you should have stayed far away. All that talk about not caring. But deep down, you're just as greedy. It's disgusting." Her words made me laugh, and I actually did laugh out loud. Honestly, I don't like dealing with people who aren't smart. Especially not Hannah. Bella once asked me if I'd figured out how to get back at Hannah. As unbelievable as it sounds, I never planned to. As long as she stayed at the company, she'd embarrass herself without my help. She was never going to be my problem. Aside from making a little noise about Joseph, she had never really been my competition. She wasn't even in the same league. I looked at her with the kind of calm one reserves for a ridiculous spectacle and said, "Hannah, don't say such stupid things again. Look at you, all worked up like I've ripped out your heart and soul. I'm only taking back what's mine, but you look like I've caused you deep personal pain. If I were you, I'd go home and tell your mom to come up with a new way to win over my father. It's sad, really. After all these years, you and your mom tried so hard to win him over. And all you've got to show for it is a meager allowance, not even a house. But don't worry. Now that I'm in charge of the company, I won't cut off that allowance. Consider it a reward for all the hard work you and your mom have put into keeping my father entertained." Her face turned various shades of red and blue before finally going pale. Then, as if she found a weak spot to attack, she smiled and said, "I may not be able to win an argument with you, but Ruby, I'm not empty-handed. After all, your boyfriend of 7 years? He's mine now." I didn't even look up. Trash belongs in the trash can. If he's yours, then so be it. What's there to brag about? I had a feeling Hannah picked Joseph not just because she liked him, but also because he was the youngest manager in the company, with my father clearly favoring him. She probably believed that Joseph's future held more than just a department director role. She needed a foothold in the company, and Joseph was her best ticket. In some ways, Joseph and Hannah were a perfect match. They both put on a show, using each other to climb higher, only to end up with nothing in the end. The thought of it made me laugh. After I finished speaking, I was truly done with her. With as much patience as I could muster, I gave her a calm but firm look and said, "This is the last time I'll be nice to you, Hannah. I suggest you keep your head down and act wisely at the company. Otherwise, I promise you, I won't always be this kind." She looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't Joseph. I didn't have the patience to coddle her. I stood there, smiling, as I watched the tears well up in her eyes. Honestly, they were quite beautiful to look at. Joseph's resignation didn't surprise me. I couldn't think of a reason why he'd stay. He followed all the usual resignation procedures, and I didn't interfere. It wasn't until he completed everything that, on his last day, he messaged me, asking if we could talk. I wasn't sure what there was left to discuss. The night my father revealed my identity, Joseph had called me, saying he was waiting for me outside my apartment. But that week, my father had asked me to stay at the family estate for a few days to help me navigate the company's inner workings. I didn't return to my apartment, nor did I reply to Joseph's message. After that, he seemed to get the hint and stopped trying to contact me. But maybe this time, because it was his final goodbye, he still came to see me even though I hadn't responded. I always admired Joseph's ability to stay calm. Maybe that's a quality successful people tend to have. The ability to pretend as if betrayal and heartbreak had never even happened. He was so composed that I wondered if my memory was playing tricks on me. His expression was sharp, giving away nothing, and he even smiled like an old friend. As he stood at my door, "Can we talk?" I remained silent as he walked in and handed me a cup of coffee. I took it, and we stood side by side in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city's dazzling skyline. The lights from the towering buildings glittered like stars, making it feel like we were standing in a galaxy. I heard Joseph sigh beside me. "Do you remember when we first started working here? That was almost 5 years ago." To fresh graduates standing in a similar high-rise looking out over the city's lights. Back then, he was full of ambition, ready to make a name for himself. But they assigned him to menial tasks. Later, he landed $1 million deal on his own. I still remember the way he looked, pale from drinking too much, clutching his aching stomach. But his face lit up with excitement. He said to me, "Ruby, I'm going to build a home for us in the city." That deal ended up going to his boss's credit, and Joseph only got a 500 yuan bonus. He used that 500 yuan to take me out for hot pot. I couldn't see his expression through the rising steam, but I remember his voice. It was the first and last time I ever heard him sound confused and lost. He asked me, "Ruby, at this rate, when will we ever make it after that meal?" I went to see my father. Since my parents' divorce, my mother hadn't spoken to him, let alone used any of his money or resources. Even though he had given me an unlimited credit card, neither my mother nor I ever touched it. That was the first time I asked him for help for Joseph. I still remember the look of surprise on my father's face. He was clearly pleased that I had finally come to him for something. But I also remember his words, "Ruby, if a man can't handle a simple task like this on his own and needs my help, then he's not worthy of being part of the Clark family." But despite his words, he did take notice of Joseph and praised him a few times in public. When the higher-ups show interest, doors start to open and Joseph's career naturally took off. He was smart and capable. I just never realized that somewhere along this path, we had drifted so far apart. He was like one of those ancient scholars who dreamed of skyrocketing to success by winning the Favo, or of a princess. In his mind, that was his way of making it. His voice carried a nostalgic sigh, as if pulling from the past. "How did we end up like this?" I scoffed. "Joseph, don't play the nostalgia card with me. I get your survival of the fittest move back then. But now? Don't make me lose even more respect for you." He chuckled too, tilting his head to focus on me, but didn't push the conversation further. After a long pause, the smile faded from his face, replaced by something more serious. "Can we not even be just friends anymore? Ruby, I betrayed you, but you kept things from me too. Doesn't that make us even?" "Joseph," I sighed, looking back at him, my tone flat. "I don't know what kind of even you're talking about. The balance you're referring to is based on the fact that I'm Clark's daughter. Have you really never thought about it? If I weren't Clark's daughter, where would I be now? Would I be watching you and the chairman's daughter sneaking around, playing the perfect couple? While I'd be forced to resign under the pressure of your combined power? And because of the non-compete agreement, I wouldn't even be able to work in the same industry anymore. All those years of hard work, all my efforts, All my battles would have become stepping stones for you and Hannah's sweet life together. While I'm left wandering the streets, lost and broken, you and Hannah would be living the high life in some fancy penthouse. Joseph, now tell me, are we really even? How do you think we can balance the scales? I glanced at his pale, stunned face and smiled faintly, cold and distant. I politely said, Joseph, there's no evening the score. What you owe me, you owe for life? And I'm not feeling generous enough to forgive you. In the future, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. If we ever meet again, we'll just be strangers passing by. With that, I didn't waste another second on him. I glanced at my watch and said coolly, it's time for you to go. Joseph's retreating figure was unsteady. I hadn't seen him look so defeated in years. But this was the path he chose. Later, at industry conferences, I saw Joseph a couple of times. By then, I had taken over my father's position, and everywhere I went, I was the center of attention. Joseph stood on the outskirts, starting from the bottom again at a new company, climbing the ladder slowly. He didn't even have the chance to speak to me. Afterward, during a meal with my father, he casually mentioned Hannah's love life, saying she'd been swindled, lost both money and pride. She doesn't have an ounce of sense, he said. I didn't know when Joseph and Hannah broke up, but for two people brought together by self-interest, it wasn't surprising they fell apart for the same reason. I sipped my tea, gazing at the garden in full bloom. It was mid-April, and I realized another spring had quietly passed. The past, like a boat that had long sailed beyond the mountains.